Well, that's not what you want to happen, is it?
Oh boy. Oh yeah.
Full confession. I went to Warped Tour this past weekend and am now feeling every week of those 38 years currently. So that's where I'm at physically, mentally, emotionally. I need to get back at this door because it has been sitting in the background as a boogeyman and I haven't known where I want to go with it. And I just sometimes you got to just punch the thing in the face and see where it ends up. So that's what we're doing. And step one of that is I got to cut some joinery. So let's get busy. You know, you ever have one of those days where, like, as soon as you get started doing a thing, one of the machines just lays a giant turd? That's what happened yesterday. Literally, as soon as I said, let's go. Turns out the thicknesser doesn't want to work anymore. And while I admit I didn't need to use the thicknesser yesterday, I do have two shopmates, and they needed to use them. And as I am typically the one to maintain the machinery, well, I had to spend the day yesterday fixing the thicknesser instead. So, all of that said, I just wanted to address that because if you've ever felt like sometimes things take way longer than they should, well, it's because things often take way longer than they should, but it might also not be your fault. It's not because you're slow. It's just that, like, running a wood shop takes maintenance. That's how it works. That said, that out of the way, new wardrobe, let's get busy again. Milling is done, which is wonderful because those long pieces have a lot of leverage and they're just difficult to wield. And you might have noticed that I milled them down to just slightly oversized final width on the table saw and then ran them over the jointer one more time. And the reason for that is because with a piece that large, you might have some variance in the quality of the surface off the table saw blade. So leaving it just a 32nd oversize or maybe even a 64th oversize and then milling it down one more time on the jointer is going to clean up that surface. You're going to get a nice, even, smooth surface from which you can do all of your layout and work and be a little bit maybe more accurate, maybe, if nothing else, more aesthetically pleasing. So that's why you saw me do that. Now, let's talk about how I'm going to cut the shallow grooves in those long pieces. Now, we are at the stage where accuracy becomes absolutely critical. And, well, a door is just a big frame and panel, quite literally, right? Like, I'm going to have a giant groove through these stiles, and then I'm going to do the joinery on the rails, and there's going to be a little bit of a stub or a haunch, so those are going to fit into the groove, and then the frames are going to fit into that groove as well. And as I was milling these pieces up, I was thinking how I was going to approach that. And my initial inclination was to set up the dado stack and do a double cut, right? So make sure my fence is exactly where I need it to be, and then make a cut that is slightly less than the width of the groove, and then flip the board over and make another pass. Because that way, whatever the groove is even if it's not absolutely perfectly to size, which it's going to be 5/8 in width, then if nothing else, it's centered, and that's important. So I thought about doing that, but then of course the problem of this being as long as it is, this is 98 inches currently, that's gonna prove to be a problem. I might be able to mill it pretty accurately, but it's not going to be perfectly accurate just because, you know, my body is flawed, your body is flawed, that's just the nature of the beast. So what I think I'm gonna do instead is set up a router jig. Now, yes, I am going to use a Festool router. Guys, It's not about the Festool router, okay? If you don't like the fact that I have a Festool router, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Your daddy should have hugged you more. I don't know what to say. It doesn't matter what tool you use. You've seen me do this exact technique I'm about to use with my trim router from DeWalt. It's like a $100 router. You can use whatever router you have. The thing is, this is a plunge router. So that's a big advantage for this particular operation. And the main reason is because this is the only router I own that has 2 fences. And what this is going to allow me to do is to set this up on the tool. Nope, strike that. To set the tool up on the piece so that I can just clamp on both sides of the piece and ride the router down the entire length of the board. And that is going to give me an accurate groove. So that's what we're going to do. I hope that makes sense. Let's get busy doing it.
All right off the top, let's talk about router bits. So I am using a spiral downcut bit for this operation. And I'll admit to you guys right now, as a human being who is flawed, I never remember the difference between upcut and downcut. I don't know why, but I had to Google it right before I hit record. That's the truth. So the spiral downcut bit, the helical cutters are oriented in such a way that they are pushing the fibers downward away from the collet or away from the shaft. And in this orientation with the router upright, theoretically, they are compressing rather than tearing up the fibers and potentially reducing the risk of tear out. That's the theory behind it. The truth is, if your router bit is sharp and you've got your feed and your speed right, then you're probably not going to get a lot of tear out anyway. But in some woods and in some particular operations, that could be very helpful. So that's something to bear in mind. Now you'll see, I know a couple of you guys just saw that. My groove is not a perfect 5/8. That's what I call a nominal 5/8, right? Like that, it's probably a couple of thou shy of 5/8. And that's okay. That's pretty damn good. What I need, and I said this earlier, and I'll say it again in this video, what I need is for that groove in those tenons or those mortises to be in the center of the board. That's what I care about. So that it's 5/8 of an inch nominally, and it looks good, it feels good. I'm going to move on to making sure that everything is oriented properly so I can do the mirrored operation on the other piece. Now, I did clamp these two together so that I could check that my grain orientation was correct, because you guys know how I feel about that. And then I could transfer my marks to my other piece. So I went ahead and plowed out 3/4 of an inch. And when I do a groove like that, my grooves are usually a little extra deep. So I think it's 3/4 of an inch plus maybe a 64th or a 1/28th, somewhere in that, just a fingernail more so that I know nothing is going to bottom out in that groove and get stuck during the glue up. And then I started marking out where my mortises are going to go. Now you will see me work to pencil lines a lot in this video, and that might bother some people, and that's totally fine. I understand that we all have our preferences, but when you're working on a scale this large, it generally makes the most sense to work to a pencil line, because you can work accurately to pencil lines if you take your time, if you're careful, and then you set up proper stops to make sure that everything goes well until...
Alright, currently, I have no idea what the hell just happened. Doesn't look like my bit slipped. Clearly I hit something. I don't have a flashlight in here. And in spite of the fact that it's 50 degrees outside, it is hot as balls in my shop because they turn the heat on full blast.
It's so damn hot.
So that's fun. Okay, I think we're okay right now. My best guess as to what just happened is I just wobbled a little bit. So let's take a look at this bit in this hole and break this down just a little bit, because I think this was user error on my part. So here's, if I'm a gambling man, here's what I think just happened. This bit is 4 inches long and I need to create a 3-inch mortise. So I don't have a lot of material left up in this collet. Also, the cutter area on this bit looks to be somewhere in the range of like 3+ inches. I've got to extend it down a little bit. I've got 3/4 of an inch of gap in here from where that groove just got plowed through, so I should be reasonably safe, but I think I got down to the shaft here, and then I think, because what I was attempting to do was plunge down to full depth, then move over to the other side of the mortise, plunge down to full depth, and remove the waste, I don't think the bit liked that. So that's, again, that's a guess, but I think that's probably what happened. I am unsure if the shaft is a different size from the cutter head. It shouldn't be, but manufacturing errors can happen. It can be ever so slightly thicker than the cutter head is itself. So if that's the case, I'm only going to be able to get whatever the cutter diameter is. Strike that. The cutter head length is of the router bit. So I'm going to try a different approach, which is to say I'm going to plunge down somewhere in the range of the length of the cutter head, and then I'm going to remove all the waste, and then I'm going to plunge down to final depth. And if I get kick in that same way, then I'm only going to be able to go that far. That's it. Full stop. That'll be what it is. So, take 2. Hard part's done. We'll see. Maybe the dryads have a joke to play on me yet. But effectively, plowing an accurate groove and cutting 8 mortises, I think, is probably going to be the more time-consuming part of this mortise and tenon operation. Now that that's done, what I'm going to do is focus on starting to... Words are hard right now, guys. My brain is affected by whatever my body is trying to expel, and I'm doing the best I can. Bear with me. I am going to start cutting tenons. Now, in order to do that, what I'm going to do is cut my pieces to final width. I just said it. Words are hard. Cut them to final length, and then I'm going to cut the cheeks of my tenons using the dado stack. My overall length is going to be 36, which is the 30-inch shoulder between styles, plus the 3-inch tenons on either side, so 36 inches, and then I'll switch out for the dado stack. And the reason I'm doing it on that, simply because it's a little bit faster for me to do that. If you do not have a dado stack, or if you don't have a saw that is beefy enough to handle a dado stack, or if you live across the pond and dado stacks are not a thing, you can of course do this with a router the exact same way that I just did that. You're effectively going to cut one cheek, flip the piece over, cut another cheek, and then you'll have a nice, accurate, centered tenon. It's the exact same process I'm about to do on the dado stack, just a little bit slower because the actual bit itself is going to be smaller. So, all that said, let's get back to work. If you guys are familiar with my design process at all, then you know that I like to walk. I'll meander the streets of Philly for hours at a time while I work through design ideas in my head, and sometimes I like to have a little music on. But one thing that drives me crazy is the inability to hear the world around me when I have my earbuds in, especially if I'm walking through the busy streets of Center City. And in those moments, I opt for an open ear design, which is why I love the Essential Open Earbuds from Raycon, the sponsor of this week's video. Whereas regular earbuds block out everything, from cars honking to someone calling your name, the Essential Open Earbuds from Raycon sit just outside your ear canal, so you get a really clear sound but can actually hear what's happening around you too. They're lightweight and the ear hook part rotates, so they actually stay in. And I despise earbuds that fall out, like certain fruit-based products. And just like Raycon's other products, these earbuds have multi-point connectivity, allowing you to connect to multiple devices and switch seamlessly without hassle, which is great when I'm using my phone and laptop while I'm editing. I've been using these a lot since I got them, whether at the gym or out on a walk or just putzing about the house while listening to a podcast so I don't have to carry my phone from room to room. And I really do like these earbuds because they don't get uncomfortable after an hour or two. And again, and I cannot stress this enough, they don't fall out. The Essential Open earbuds are here for the holiday season and are selling fast. Raycon audio products are up to 20% off this holiday season, so if you want to get yourself or someone you love a pair, just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/ENCurtis to save on Raycon audio products site-wide. Make sure to order by December 15th to guarantee delivery by Christmas, because great gifts shouldn't show up late. And thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this week's video.
All right, let's talk about accuracy. I mentioned earlier that it doesn't actually matter if the center groove or the mortises are exactly 5/8 of an inch, and it doesn't. But the other side of that coin is, well, now it does, right? The reason it doesn't matter that the grooves or the mortises were exactly 5/8 is because whatever the groove and the mortises is, I can make the tenons to that size. However, what that means is I have to work accurately on the tenons to match whatever the mortises are. Now, I took a lot of time to make sure that my pieces were exactly 36 inches long. And can I just note, I get a lot of heat on the internet for making unsafe cuts all the time. And it's true, I do make unsafe cuts all the time. But that was I waited for the blade to stop right there before I took that offcut off the machine. So it does happen. I just usually cut it out of the video. Now, coming back to accurate setups, I made sure that my pieces were exactly 36 because I was going to make my tenons exactly 3 inches long. And the part that does really matter is that my shoulders are 30 inches because the door has to fit the opening that I need the door to fit. And by the way, you can see right now, I just made the decision to put a backer behind that piece so that I'm not blowing out material on the shoulder. So it's good practice to constantly be aware of what's going on and making adjustments and decisions based on whatever is happening to the material, to the tool, to get the best possible results. Now, once everything was cut to length, I could go ahead and set up my dado stack and cut my cheeks and just rip them through, make quick work of it. And then, importantly, I'm checking my tenons to make sure that they fit my mortises. And if they don't, I can micro adjust. I don't care what the thickness of those tenons are. What I care is that they fit the mortises. I'm going to die on this hill, guys. Now, with my mortises, or rather my tenons fitting my mortises nicely, I could go ahead and mark out my shoulders. I could cut the haunches on both sides, and then I could remove the waist in the middle of that double tenon that you see right there. And again, it's all to pencil line. But you can work accurately to pencil lines if you take your time, lay it out properly, and set your machines up well.
Big door. Well, friends, that is just about that. At its core, it's a fundamentally simple operation. It's just mortise and tenons. The thing to focus on about this video, and the thing I hope you take away from this video, is when you're working in different scales, you have different choices to make. It is really, in this particular case, the choice is really about whether you take the work to the machine or whether you take the machine to the work. That's it, full stop. And regardless of your space or your tooling, that's the choice you're making. So I don't want you to focus so much on the fact that I used a Festool router, though I'm sure some people will. It's really about when I have an 8-foot style and I need to plow a groove in there, it made more sense for me to use a router to do that than to take it to the table saw and try to do it with a dado stack. And then the opposite applied. When I have this much more portable piece in my rails, it was much more easy, that's right, to take the piece to the machine and do it that way. Now, depending on the machinery that you have, your choices may vary. If you have a big honkin' space with a big long outfeed table on the other end of your high-powered table saw, it might be easier and more efficient for you to set up a dado stack to run that groove. If you don't have that, but you do, like you got a tiny little job site table saw, but you do have a big beefy router, it might be more efficient for you to cut the tenons using the router. So it just, whatever your setup is, you have to make decisions on how to do the job quickly and accurately based on that. And if you have none of those things, hey, you can do it all with hand tools. You absolutely can do this with hand tools. It's just a different operation altogether. So if your machinery is not equipped to deal with large-scale joinery, break out the old panel saw and chisels and router plane and go to town. You know, that's how it works. That being said, a couple of quick things. I haven't mentioned in a long while my Patreon, where you guys can get behind the scenes footage where we talk about all of the breakdown of how I go about setting this up, making these decisions, etc., etc. You can check out the podcast, Woodworking is Bull, which I host with my dear friend Paul Jasper, all about design. And of course, check out the other channel I do with my shopmate Larissa Huff. It's called Woodworking is Hard, and I think it's pretty damn good. If nothing else, we have a good time making things together. So all of those things are available, and if you want to go pick up merch, you can go to bonfire.com/ENCurtis, I think. The link will be down below. All of those links will be down below. Thank you guys for your support as always, and I will see you in the next video. Hold, please. Almost forgot. Cheers.